She said she was a federal judge. Can you believe that? That's what Officer Brent Halley told his sergeant after handcuffing a well-dressed black woman in a courthouse parking lot. What I didn't know. She was Judge Naomi Sinclair, one of the most respected legal minds in the state, in broad daylight, with no weapons, no threats, no crime. She was arrested for looking like she didn't belong. Langston Hughes once asked, "What happens to a dream deferred?" In Naomi's case, the dream of equal justice nearly shattered in the back seat of a squad car. This story isn't just outrageous, it's painfully real, and it echoes what too many still face in America today. If you think stories like this shouldn't be ignored, talk back, drop a comment, share how this made you feel, and don't forget to subscribe, because the fight for justice doesn't end in silence, and neither should we. Naomi Sinclair squinted against the afternoon glare as she bent over the passenger seat of her silver Lexus RX, parked outside the downtown federal courthouse. The dry heat of the Texas sun shimmered off the asphalt, and sweat trickled down the back of her neck beneath her neat gray curls. She was running late. Her leather briefcase had flipped over during her frantic drive, and now the contents were scattered across the front seat. Legal briefs, receipts, a travel-size bottle of hand sanitizer, and hopefully her missing wallet. "Come on," she muttered, rifling through papers with swift, practiced hands. Her black judge's robe was folded neatly on the back seat, ready for the afternoon session. Her cell phone buzzed again. The fourth call in 5 minutes from her clerk. She didn't even glance at the screen. Her focus was razor-sharp. Find the wallet, get inside, and try not to embarrass herself by walking into court without ID. A low rumble of an engine made her pause. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a black and white police cruiser pulling into the otherwise empty lot. The vehicle came to a slow stop directly across from her. Naomi stiffened, but didn't turn around. She knew that posture, that idle presence. She could feel the weight of the officer's stare, as if it were pressing between her shoulder blades. She reached deeper into the car. That's when the door slammed. "Ma'am," a voice barked, sharp and authoritative. Naomi froze. She stood up slowly, her heart already sinking. The officer was a young white man, early 30s, lean, with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses. His badge caught the sun as he approached, with one hand resting on his belt, dangerously close to his holster. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he asked, tone clipped. Naomi kept her voice level. "I misplaced my wallet. I'm just trying to find it before my court session." "This your vehicle?" "Yes." "You got ID?" "I just said I'm looking for it." "That's what I'm trying to find. My wallet is in here somewhere." His jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle." She hesitated. "Officer, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'm a federal judge. My name is Naomi Sinclair. My ID is in this car. I just need to—" "That's enough," he snapped, raising his hand. "I don't care who you say you are. Step away from the vehicle." Naomi complied, slowly stepping back, palms out, breathing shallow and controlled. Her heart pounded, not from fear. She'd seen too much to be afraid, but from a cold, familiar anger. "Hands where I can see them," the officer ordered, drawing his handcuffs. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. This is my car. I'm a judge." He cut her off with a dry laugh. "A judge, huh? That's a new one. Lady, you're trying to break into a Lexus in broad daylight. I'm not buying your little story." He grabbed her wrist. The cold metal of the cuffs clamped tight around her skin. "You're under arrest for suspicion of vehicle theft." Naomi didn't resist. She stared at the asphalt, her expression blank. The same hands that had signed court orders and handed down sentences were now bound behind her back like a criminal. The resolution of her face didn't crack, but inside, a fire roared. She had given decades to the law. She had studied at Harvard. She had presided over federal cases that changed lives. And none of it mattered in that moment, because to this officer, all he saw was a black woman snooping in a nice car. As he led her toward the cruiser, she glanced once more at her Lexus. Her briefcase lay open, her ID likely tucked beneath a folder or wedged in the seat. So close, but her voice hadn't mattered. Her title hadn't mattered. Only his assumption had. Inside the squad car, the hard plastic seat bit into her back. She looked out through the metal grate in front of her, breathing slow, measured breaths. She knew this would be fixed eventually. The truth always rose, eventually. But she also knew that for many others like her, the truth came too late, or not at all. And as the cruiser pulled out of the lot, Judge Naomi Sinclair made a silent promise. This wouldn't end in silence. The fluorescent lights in the precinct flickered as Naomi Sinclair sat stiffly in a metal chair, her hands still cuffed behind her back. The holding room smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Her wrist sighed, but she said nothing. She had once presided over hearings in rooms like this. Now she was on the other side of the table. Across the room, Officer Brent Halley leaned against the wall, arms crossed, wearing a smug expression like it was part of his uniform. Every so often he glanced at her with open skepticism, as if trying to guess what kind of lie she'd spin next. So he finally said, pushing off the wall, "You sticking to that judge story?" Naomi lifted her chin. "I'm not sticking to anything. It's the truth. I'm a federal judge. My identification is in my vehicle." Brent snorted. "Right. And I'm the Secretary of Defense." He walked over to the table and slapped down a clipboard. "You don't have ID. You were seen rifling through a car that doesn't look like it belongs to you. You were acting suspicious. That's textbook probable cause." Naomi's eyes didn't flinch. "And yet you haven't bothered to check the vehicle registration or run my name through any database." Brent shrugged. "Because you could be lying. People lie every day. That's how this job works." "No, Officer Halley," she said, her voice cool and deliberate. "That's how injustice works." The room fell silent. Brent stared at her for a moment, jaw tight. "Lady, you've got one hell of an attitude for someone in cuffs. You keep pushing, I'll add resisting arrest to the list." "I've complied with every one of your orders," Naomi said sharply. "But I will not apologize for standing in my truth." He turned away, muttering under his breath, pacing like he was looking for something to hit. Naomi could feel the tension building again. He didn't know what to do with her, and that made her dangerous. She shifted in her seat, wincing as the metal bit into her skin. "You've had me in these cuffs for over an hour. That's excessive." Brent spun around. "What do you expect? You want special treatment because you're playing judge?" Naomi stared at him. "I don't want special treatment. I want lawful treatment." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty maybe, but it was gone just as fast. He stormed out of the room without another word. Naomi let out a long breath, her chest tight with frustration. She had been through difficult interrogations before, on the bench, in chambers, behind closed doors with high-powered attorneys, but this was different. Here, she wasn't Naomi Sinclair, respected judge. She was just another black woman assumed to be a criminal. Minutes passed. Then the door creaked open again. A younger officer stepped in, clipboard in hand. He looked like he'd just graduated from the academy. Nervous eyes, a buzz cut too short, unsure of where to place his hands. "Ma'am," he said quietly, glancing at the cuffs. "Would you like to make your phone call now?" Naomi nodded once. "Yes, I would." He hesitated. "You'll have 5 minutes. That's all I need." He guided her down the hallway, past rows of desks and flickering monitors. Officers glanced up but said nothing. No one asked why a middle-aged black woman in a tailored blouse and handcuffs was walking past her desks. He brought her to a small room with a landline on a steel table. "Here," he said, finally removing the cuffs. Naomi flexed her sore wrists and picked up the receiver. She dialed a number she knew by heart. The phone rang once. Then, "This is Reyes." "Michael," Naomi said, steadying her voice. "It's Naomi. I'm at Central Precinct. I've been arrested." There was a pause. "What?" "They think I was stealing my own car. I told them who I was. They didn't listen." "I'm on my way," he said, voice sharp and furious. "Don't say another word to anyone." She hung up the phone, hands trembling slightly, but not from fear, from the overwhelming surge of dignity, anger, and relief. Brent Haley was leaning by the door when she walked out. "So, who'd you call? Your lawyer?" "No," Naomi replied, her tone like steel. "My colleague from the Department of Justice." Brent's smirk faltered. "Only slightly. Big talk." "No," Naomi said calmly. "Big truth." He didn't follow her back to the holding room. She walked ahead of him, head held high, wrist sore but unbowed. Whatever happened next, she would not be silenced. The fight had just begun. The door to the precinct slammed open just after 4 p.m., and everything changed. Michael Reyes entered with measured urgency, his gray suit immaculate despite the summer heat. A seasoned federal attorney with 20 years in civil rights litigation, Michael didn't walk, he commanded space. Behind him was Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Karen Monroe, her badge displayed prominently, her eyes scanning the station like a hawk circling prey. They didn't ask for permission. They walked straight past the front desk, past startled officers, past the receptionist who barely managed to stammer, "Can I help you?" Michael's voice was ice. "Where is Judge Naomi Sinclair?" In the back, holding area, Naomi sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her wrists were still raw from the cuffs, but she had regained her calm. She heard footsteps, sharp, deliberate, and raised her head, just as the door burst open. Michael was already speaking before the officer behind him could catch up. "Judge Sinclair," he said, his tone all business but his eyes full of fury. "Are you all right?" "I've been better," she replied evenly, rising to her feet. Behind Michael, Chief Monroe stepped in, flashing her badge at the stunned patrol officer. "I'm Chief Deputy Marshal Monroe," she announced. "We're here on official business. This woman is a sitting federal judge. You've made a grave mistake." The young officer stammered. "Doc, we were just following procedure." "No, you weren't," Michael cut in. "You were following bias." Within minutes, the precinct turned chaotic. Officer Brent Haley appeared at the far end of the corridor, walking fast, his jaw clenched. When he saw Michael and Monroe, his steps faltered, but only for a second. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice rising. Michael stepped toward him. "You arrested a federal judge without verifying her identity, without running her license plate, and without giving her the right to make a call for over an hour. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Brent crossed his arms. She didn't have ID. She was acting suspicious. "I had probable cause." Chief Monroe's tone dropped an octave. "You had prejudice, not probable cause." Brent's face flushed red. "Look, I didn't know who she was, okay?" "That's the problem," Naomi said, stepping forward. "You didn't care who I was. You saw a black woman in a car and decided that was enough." There was a beat of silence. Several nearby officers had stopped pretending not to listen. The tension in the room had turned electric. Michael's voice cut through it like a blade. "You're not only facing an internal affairs investigation, there are civil rights implications here. We will be pursuing this to the fullest extent of the law." Brent tried to retort, but Monroe stepped in. "Where's the watch commander?" "He's not here," Brent mumbled. "Then get your sergeant," she snapped. Minutes later, Sergeant Wallace, a veteran officer with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes, entered the room. He looked at Naomi, then at the scene unfolding in front of him. "What the hell happened here?" he asked, voice low but firm. Michael laid it out with clinical precision. Naomi's arrest, the refusal to run plates, the denied phone call, the mocking tone, the abuse of power. Every word was a nail driven into Brent's future. Sergeant Wallace turned to Brent. "Is all that true?" Brent bristled. "She didn't have ID. What was I supposed to do? Just believe her?" "No," Naomi said softly. "You were supposed to verify. Not assume. Not escalate. Not humiliate." Wallace turned back to her. "Judge Sinclair, I'm truly sorry. We'll get this corrected immediately." Naomi gave a single nod. "That's a start." Brent looked around the room. His authority was gone, stripped away by the weight of his own actions. He opened his mouth to speak, but no one was listening anymore. Michael took Naomi by the arm, gently guiding her out of the holding area. The walk through the station felt different now. The same officers who had looked past her before now watched her with wide eyes and uneasy silence. She held her head high. Outside, the air was cooler. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Naomi stopped by her Lexus and looked down at it, as if to confirm it was still hers, that her name still matched the registration. Michael unlocked it, retrieved her briefcase, and handed it to her. Her wallet had slipped between the seats. She held it up for a moment, a quiet victory. But this wasn't over, not even close. "I want a meeting with the police chief," Naomi said. Michael nodded. "Already scheduled for tomorrow morning." As they drove away, Naomi watched the precinct disappear in the rearview mirror. The bruises on her wrists would fade, but the memory wouldn't, and neither would the fire. The next morning, Naomi Sinclair stood before the tall glass doors of the downtown police headquarters. She was dressed sharply, in a navy blue suit, her federal badge clipped neatly to her lapel. Her face was composed, but the steel in her eyes hadn't dulled overnight. Beside her stood Michael Reyes, holding a leather folder packed with documentation, statements, and the beginnings of a formal complaint. They were led to a conference room on the second floor, neutral colors, a large oak table, and an American flag in the corner. Waiting inside was Police Chief Randall Hernandez, a graying man in his late 50s with a reputation for diplomacy and cautious leadership. Officer Brent Halley sat stiffly in the corner of the room, dressed in uniform but stripped of the bravado he had worn the day before. He didn't look at Naomi as she entered. "Judge Sinclair," Chief Hernandez said, standing as she entered. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Naomi sat across from him, folding her hands. "Thank you, Chief. Though I wish it were under different circumstances." Hernandez nodded solemnly. "Let's address what happened. I've reviewed the preliminary incident report. Frankly, I'm concerned." "You should be more than concerned," Michael said, his tone direct. "Your officer detained a sitting federal judge without cause, denied her rights, and escalated a situation built on racial bias." Brent finally spoke. "I didn't know she was a judge." Naomi turned toward him, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "That's not the issue, Officer Halley. You didn't care who I was. You didn't verify. You saw a black woman in a car and jumped to a conclusion. You mocked me. You cuffed me. You refused to check the facts." Brent's jaw tightened. "You didn't have ID. I told you my name. I told you my title. You could have run my plates. You could have radioed dispatch. You chose not to. That's negligence at best and willful abuse at worst." Chief Hernandez raised a hand to de-escalate. "We're not here to argue. We're here to find out how this happened and ensure it doesn't happen again." Michael leaned forward. "Let's be clear. This didn't just happen. It's part of a pattern. Judge Sinclair is one of the few with the platform to fight back. But how many others don't? How many more Officer Halleys are out there deciding who looks like they belong?" Hernandez looked visibly uncomfortable. "I understand your frustration." Naomi's voice hardened. "This isn't about frustration, Chief. This is about accountability. I'm not here for an apology and a PR campaign. I'm here for real consequences." The room was silent for a long beat. Then Hernandez spoke. "Effective immediately, Officer Halley is placed on administrative leave without pay pending a full investigation. If misconduct is confirmed, we will take appropriate disciplinary action, including termination." Brent shot a look at Hernandez, but said nothing. Naomi's expression didn't change. "And what about department-wide reform?" "We've initiated a review of training protocols," Hernandez replied. "We're working with external consultants to improve our de-escalation and anti-bias procedures." Naomi nodded slowly. "I want a seat on that oversight committee, and I want community members involved, not just insiders." "You'll have it," Hernandez said, without hesitation. Naomi finally turned back to Brent. "You thought I didn't belong in that car. You saw my skin before you saw my humanity. You made a choice. Now you live with it." Brent looked down, his face pale and drawn. He had no defense left. Hernandez stood, signaling the meeting's close. "Thank you for coming, Judge Sinclair, and again I deeply regret what occurred." Naomi rose. "What I want, Chief, is not just regret. I want results." As she and Michael exited the building, reporters were already gathering outside, alerted by whispers in City Hall. Naomi didn't stop to speak to them. Not yet. This wasn't about headlines. This was about change. As they stepped into the morning light, Michael turned to her. "You think he got the message?" "He better have," she said, "because I'm not done." She looked back at the precinct, not with bitterness, but with purpose. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. 1 week later, Judge Naomi Sinclair stood once again inside the police headquarters, but this time, the atmosphere was unmistakably different. She wasn't escorted through the side door or treated like a suspect. She walked with purpose, head held high, heels clicking firmly against the polished tile floor. Today, she wasn't just confronting injustice, she was reshaping the system that allowed it to happen. Beside her, Michael Reyes carried a thick binder filled with community testimonies, data on racial profiling, and a formal action plan. Naomi wasn't here just to follow up on Officer Brent Halley's disciplinary process. She was here to ensure the department never again had the chance to treat another black person the way she had been treated. They were ushered into a smaller meeting room upstairs. Chief Hernandez was already waiting, seated at the head of the table. He stood when Naomi entered. "Judge Sinclair, Mr. Reyes," he greeted respectfully. "Thank you for coming." Naomi took a seat across from him. Brent Halley was notably absent this time. Hernandez didn't delay. "We've completed our investigation. Based on the findings, Officer Halley's actions violated multiple department protocols, failing to verify identity, unlawful detainment, and conduct unbecoming of an officer." He paused, folding his hands. "Effective today, his employment is terminated." Naomi didn't flinch. She gave a small nod, but her expression remained measured. "That's a necessary step," she said, "but not nearly enough." Hernandez nodded. "I agree. That's why, as of this morning, we've launched a department-wide review of officer conduct, de-escalation policies, and anti-bias training. We're working with civil rights experts to build a new oversight structure, and per your request, we'd like you to serve on the committee." Naomi exchanged a glance with Michael. Then she leaned forward.
"I accept the position," she said, "but I'm not here to check boxes or lend legitimacy to a broken system. I'm here to bring accountability. Real accountability. That means transparency, open data, and community voices at the table, not just politicians and public relations."
"We understand," Hernandez replied. "And I agree, you'll have full access. In fact, we've already begun consulting with neighborhood advocacy groups. Their input will be built into the reform process." Naomi exhaled slowly, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for the past week. The system had moved slowly, grudgingly, but it had moved. "Good," she said, "because the people of this city deserve a police force that sees them as citizens, not threats." Hernandez's face was serious. "There's a lot of work ahead." "There always is," Naomi said. After the meeting, Naomi and Michael walked out into the midday sun. The sky was cloudless, the air dry and warm. They paused on the steps of the station. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "He'll probably appeal," Michael said quietly. "Let him," Naomi replied. "This isn't about him anymore." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a flyer, a printed announcement for a community forum she was hosting that weekend. The headline read, "Justice from the Ground Up. Real Stories, Real Reform." She handed one to Michael. "We've already confirmed a dozen speakers. 2 of them are teenagers who were stopped by officers just for walking through their own neighborhood." Michael took the flyer and nodded. "You're building something." "We're all building something," she said. "Every story, every voice, they matter. People are tired of apologies. They want change they can see." As they walked to Naomi's car, she glanced at the spot in the lot where it had all started. Her Lexus sat parked near the front, the same car that had nearly cost her dignity, her freedom, and worse, but now it was just a car again. The power others had tried to strip from her no longer lived in that moment. It had been reclaimed. She opened the driver's side door and turned to Michael. "You know what's funny?" she said, a faint smile forming. "They thought they were putting me in my place. Instead, they reminded me exactly where I belong." Michael smiled. At the front of the fight, Naomi got into her car, started the engine, and pulled into the street, merging into the steady rhythm of the city. She had cases to hear, reforms to write, and stories to lift. Justice, she had learned, wasn't static. It had to be chased, fought for, protected. And now more than ever, she was ready to lead that charge. "Justice is what love looks like in public," said Dr. Cornel West. And in Judge Naomi Sinclair's story, we saw that truth in action. This wasn't just about one woman being wronged. It was about every unseen face, every silenced voice, every person judged by appearance instead of truth. Naomi's strength reminds us that dignity is not given, it's demanded, defended, and lived out loud. In a world where silence protects power, speaking up is a revolutionary act. Whether you're a judge or a janitor, you deserve respect, fairness, and humanity. If this story moved you, made you pause, or made you angry in a good way, don't let it stop here. Tap like, not for the algorithm but for every story like Naomi's that needs to be heard. Leave a comment. Your voice might be the one that sparks someone else's courage. And if you believe these stories matter, subscribe. Let's keep building a community that sees, hears, and stands up for justice together.